Another very valuable tool that some guys like and I hate. This is a Saiki rod. You can put a spinner or a conventional reel on here, and there's a little hole right here and a tool to pull your line out the end. But you run your line up through the tube, your Saiki rig comes out of here, and your sinker is supposed to be too big to go back into the hole. Then when you get to a spot and you want to catch bait, you just drop it in the water and you use this as your rod, and you got your reel here. And when you get done catching bait, you wind it up so just your sinker is sticking out of here, and you put it in a rod holder, and you don't have to worry about it. Then when at the end of the day you get back to the dock, you drop your Saiki rig out, hose it off, swing it around a couple times, and wind it back in and forget about it till the next trip. The reason I don't like it is that everything I do in the thought process of having fun. And catching my bait on a light spinning rod and having the rod wiggle and all that stuff, I find to be fun, even if it's herring or pilchards. Catching them with this big tube is just producing bait to go fishing. And the bait fishing might be the best part of my day, so I want to make sure I enjoy it as much as everything else. The other form of chum that we talked about while you all were missing was lights. If you're going out to catch bait at night, you should have a green hydroglow with you, or nowadays a lot of guys are having permanent lights mounted in the bottom of the boat. The hydroglow is my choice in lights because it's tough, it's durable, and I've had a lot of great luck with it. But the only other thing that would be as good, or maybe even a little better, is LED lights in the bottom of your boat to where you flip a switch and your lights are on. But the bottom line is that the green light will attract bait to your boat. So whether you're out drifting for goggle eyes in 150 feet of water, or fishing for pilchards on the anchor balls, or looking for a few live shrimp on the outgoing tide, a light is to your advantage. And green has been proven to attract the most bait fish, so you definitely want to go with green. Now another thing that we haven't touched on yet is how do you keep the bait alive on the boat? We talked about having a wire cage and hanging it in the water for storing bait overnight or for long periods of time. And by the way, they make bait cages out of different soft materials like netting material, nylon and stuff. And those are pretty good for overnight and stuff as long as there's not a lot of tide or there's not a lot of predators. And the predators can be as small as a triggerfish. If you have a netting material cage hanging in the water and you put 20 baits in it, and one dies and sinks to the bottom where there's a triggerfish or a parrotfish, to eat that bait, he'll chew a hole in your net. And then after he gets done eating that bait and he swims away, all the other baits will go out the hole in the net. And we've had major disasters, especially in the Bahamas, where we spent hours at night catching bait off the dock, got up in the morning and there was a 4 or 5 inch hole in the bottom of our bait cage and no bait. So I highly recommend wire cages or rotocast tanks to store your bait in. Now, bait on the boat. In all honesty, if you were going fishing tomorrow and you had a John boat or a bay shark or a Carolina skiff and you had nothing more than a 5-gallon bucket and a battery-operated aerator, you'd be way ahead of a guy, and put a dozen baits in there, you'd be way ahead of a guy with no live bait at all. If you have a relatively small boat and you're just getting into live bait and you want to find out what it's all about, my brother-in-law, who was a very, very good fisherman and really enjoyed fishing, never put a hole in the bottom of his boat for a live well pump. He used nothing but rule transom-mounted pumps. They just screw to the back of your boat. You run the hose up along the back. They make these little clips that you can screw to the transom to bring your hose up into the back of the boat, and your wires, clip it onto a spare battery or run the wires to your battery. But he did a hell of a lot of fishing, and this is the only live well pump he ever used. And they come in a wide variety of sizes from 300 to 1,100 gallons per hour. And then if you're hardcore fishing, you'll eventually want to have a through-the-hull pump. This is another rule pump. They come in all different sizes. Personally, I like the 1500 rule. It's made for a live well adapt position. You have a through-hull fitting to the bottom of your boat, and then a gate valve, and then the pump, and the hose is plumbed in your boat. On my boat, which is a Dusky 33, if anybody wasn't sure about that, in my back well, I actually have 2 Rule 1500s. Not that we want to run 2 pumps all the time, but we live and die by live bait. So if we have a bad connection, or for some reason the pump goes bad, or as an example, I was out at 4 o'clock in the morning one time catching pilchards and goggle eyes, and I just about maxed out my well, and I sucked up a plastic bag. And thank goodness I had a saltwater wash down, and I got really lucky. I had seen the bag floating around, and I reached under the boat with a long-handled gaff and actually gassed the bag and pulled it back out. But the bottom line is anything can go wrong with one pump. You could be in jeopardy and not having your live bait anymore, other than having a young, strong guy on the boat to bail 5-gallon buckets all day. So having 2 pumps in your main well, if you live and die by live bait, is not a bad idea. Saltwater washdowns will replace it to some extent. On my boat, I have 2 live wells. My main live well has 2 pumps, and my other live well has 1 pump, and they're all Rule 1500s shooting through the bottom of the boat. But I would be, if I didn't have live bait, I'd just go home. You laugh, Stefan. What else would there be in life if you didn't have live bait? But it was just about that bad. I'd usually go home if I didn't have live bait. But, at this point of the game, to make sure that you all get the most out of the evening, and we only have about 15 or 20 minutes left, I'd like to go to questions and answers. So, anybody? Yes, sir.
Can you target, or how would you target flying fish?
The question is, how do you get flying fish? Go out at night, put a very bright light shining on the water, and have a small cast net or a long-handled shrimp net. And if there's flying fish in the area, they'll swim into the light, and you dip them up. It's as simple as that. Actually, if the light's bright enough and the boat's white enough, they'll jump in the boat and hit you in the head, but then they won't live very well. But if you want to get flying fish, you almost have to catch them at night. I've seen guys chasing the flying fish around, throwing cast nets at them, but the percentages are too low. But if you want to catch them, you catch them at night. Yes, sir?
You mentioned the drop lights through the black lights work?
I actually had a couple of black lights that I've tried different times, and I found them not to be that effective. Green tracks the most marine life. Blue can be seen the farthest of the lights that are available. So when we're fishing for snook and tarpon and shrimp and mangrove snappers and yellowtails, stuff like that, we use a green light. When we're going out sword fishing where there's open ocean for miles around us, we use a blue light because we're trying to put up a sign that tells the swordfish, here's where dinner is, and they can see the blue light further than they can a green light. So, green inshore and blue offshore. Any other questions? Nobody has a question? Yes, sir.
Well, what is the mullet under your paper fish?
What is the mullet? I don't understand the question.
What species of mullet?
Well, there's 2 mullet that are found in our area. And the fact of the matter is, the 2 mullet are a black mullet and a silver mullet, as we know them. And I was under the impression that a striped mullet was a black mullet. But the fact of the matter is that where a tarpon will eat any mullet, doesn't care what flavor it is, most fish prefer a silver mullet. And if you were to look at the top of the 2 mullet, the top of the head on a silver mullet is kind of rounded, and the top of the head on a black mullet is kind of squared like a tiger shark, much broader, more square across the front. And the silver mullet's better bait. The silver mullet always has a gold dot on the back of the gill plate and is better bait. And the silver mullet has a more pronounced black edge on the back edge of the tail and is better bait. The black mullet, though, is more durable and is better for smoking or for frying.